You were born to stay out of the way.
Respect isn't something you can take from me.
The marble lobby gleamed beneath the morning light, polished so thoroughly it reflected every step. A steady rhythm of heels clicked against the floor. Melissa Harrington had arrived. Her white designer blazer caught the glow of the chandeliers above, and in one manicured hand she carried a handbag worth more than an average family's yearly rent. To her, this was not simply an office building. It was a stage. And everyone inside, employees, clients, even security, were the audience to her performance. Near the front entrance, Marcus Johnson knelt with a mop, finishing the last streak across the floor. His security badge hung from a lanyard around his neck, but his expression was calm, steady, the look of someone who carried dignity even in a uniform that others dismissed. Melissa slowed her pace, eyes narrowing as though she'd spotted a flaw in her perfect kingdom. "Honestly," she muttered loud enough for half the lobby to hear, "a man like this, scrubbing floors, is exactly why some people will never rise above their station." Several employees froze. The words cut the silence like glass breaking. Marcus lifted his gaze, pausing mid-motion. His dark eyes met hers without hostility, only patience. "Good morning, ma'am," he said quietly, voice even. "I'll be out of your way in a moment." Melissa tilted her head, a thin smile curling her lips. "Out of my way? Men like you were born to stay out of the way." Her tone carried the casual cruelty of someone who had never been told no. To Melissa, Marcus wasn't a man with a past, a story, or a family. He was a symbol of everything she believed she was above. A murmur rippled through the lobby. Two junior analysts exchanged an uneasy glance. One whispered, "Did she really just say that?" Another employee, phone in hand, subtly tapped the record button. Nobody wanted to breathe too loudly, but nobody could ignore what had just happened. Marcus stood slowly, straightening his back until his tall frame matched hers in height. His voice remained calm. "Respect, ma'am, is not something you can buy, and it's not something you can take away from me." For the first time in a long while, Melissa felt her cheeks flush. A flicker of unease crossed her expression, though she quickly masked it with a laugh. Sharp, dismissive. "You think your words mean something here? This is my world, my company's world. You're just a shadow mopping the floor." But the phone camera didn't miss her words, nor did the wide eyes of clients entering through the revolving doors, catching just enough of the exchange to sense the venom in her tone. Melissa adjusted her blazer and strode forward, convinced she'd silenced him, convinced that her status was shield enough. Yet, what she didn't know, what she couldn't have imagined, was that the 30 seconds of arrogance she had just unleashed would ripple through the building like a thunderclap. Within hours, the world she thought unshakable would begin to crumble, because this time, the silence wouldn't last. This time, people had proof, and the proof would travel farther and faster than her father's money, her connections, or her name could ever protect. The camera light blinked red. The recording continued. The storm had already begun. "And what about you? If you were standing in that lobby, would you stay silent or speak up? Tell us in the comments below, and make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because the truth that follows will shake everything Melissa thought she controlled." Orison. The lobby incident had left whispers echoing through the building, but Melissa walked away as if nothing had happened. That was her gift, pretending the world bent to her will. Yet behind her polished smile and designer heels lay a story that explained why she believed she could do anything, say anything, and escape untouched. Melissa Harrington had never known scarcity. Born into the Harrington real estate dynasty, she was chauffeured to private schools, raised in mansions where servants pressed her clothes, and groomed from childhood to expect obedience from others. At family dinners, her father often reminded her, "Harringtons don't ask, Melissa. We command." Those words had shaped her worldview more than any textbook ever could. By the time she reached her 30s, Melissa had secured a coveted role as senior marketing executive at a Fortune 500 company in New York. For her, the title wasn't about passion or purpose, it was about power. She wanted the promotion to vice president of marketing, not because she cared about the campaigns, but because it would give her a bigger office, a louder voice, and most importantly, a higher position above the people she dismissed as ordinary. Across the city, Marcus Johnson's life told the opposite story. He had known both triumph and devastation. Once a U.S. Army sergeant, Marcus returned home with a sense of discipline and leadership that pushed him to start his own transport business. At first, it thrived. His company gave jobs to people who needed second chances, ex-cons, single parents, young men and women with no experience but desperate for work. Marcus believed in dignity, in proving that mistakes did not define a life. But then came the financial crash. Contracts dissolved, trucks were repossessed, bills mounted like storm clouds. Within a year, Marcus lost the company he had built, the home he had worked for, and the marriage he thought would last forever. His wife left, unable to bear the weight of debt and disappointment. What remained was his daughter, a nursing student in Atlanta, and the promise Marcus made to himself. "I will keep going, no matter how small the steps, no matter how heavy the burden." Now, in a navy blue uniform with a security patch stitched to the shoulder, Marcus worked nights and early mornings in this towering corporate building. Most people passed by him without a second glance. Some offered a nod or smile. And then there was Melissa, who looked at him not as a man, but as furniture that happened to move. The tension between them wasn't new. Weeks before the lobby incident, Melissa had accidentally spilled a latte across the floor and watched with amusement as Marcus mopped it up. Another time, she dropped a bag of office trash in the middle of the hallway with a sticky note that read, "Clean this now." Marcus had responded with the same calm line every time. "Yes, ma'am. I'll take care of it." His composure infuriated her more than open resistance would have. She wanted to break him, to prove her superiority in front of others. What Melissa never noticed was the quiet rebellion growing among her colleagues. They saw Marcus as more than a janitor or guard. They noticed his courtesy, the way he held doors open, the way he greeted everyone by name. His dignity made Melissa's arrogance look even sharper, uglier. People began whispering in corners. How long until someone finally calls her out? And then came the high-stakes meeting. The reason the lobby had been so crowded that morning. A multi-million-dollar contract was on the line. Clients were flying in from Chicago. The CEO himself would be present. For Melissa, this was supposed to be her chance to shine, to secure her long-awaited promotion. She had practiced her smile, rehearsed her talking points, and even chosen her outfit with precision: white blazer for authority, red lipstick for power. But the universe has a way of setting the stage differently than we plan. While Melissa plotted her rise, the smallest detail, a mop, a phone camera, a single sentence spoken in arrogance, was already tilting the balance against her. Somewhere in the back of the lobby, a junior analyst replayed the clip on her phone, shaking her head. Another employee whispered, "If this gets out, she's finished." The evidence was there, glowing on the screen, waiting for the moment to ignite. The stage was set. The players were in position. The storm was about to break. The day of the contract meeting was meant to be Melissa Harrington's crowning moment. Everything about her posture, her outfit, even her choice of words that morning screamed ambition. She believed this was the day she would prove to the CEO that she was destined for the vice president's office. The boardroom on the top floor was already prepared. Water glasses lined up, presentation screens glowing with the company's logo, folders placed neatly at each chair. Clients from Chicago were on their way up, escorted by assistants. The air was tense with expectation. Downstairs, in the lobby, Marcus was finishing his routine check, ensuring the floor was spotless before executives arrived. He didn't mind the work. Order and discipline were values he had carried from the army. But he knew Melissa was nearby. And whenever Melissa was nearby, trouble followed. As if on cue, her heels clicked loudly across the marble. She carried a tall glass of water, her eyes already fixed on Marcus. Several employees glanced nervously, recognizing that look. It was the same look she had worn every time she decided to make someone her target. "Still on your knees, I see," she said, her voice sharp and theatrical. She paused at the boardroom entrance, where Marcus was finishing a quick polish. What a picture. Millions of dollars about to change hands, and this is the backdrop, our janitor parading in the middle of it. Marcus straightened, meeting her eyes. Calm. Steady. "Just doing my job, ma'am. Making sure everything is ready for your big moment." Her lips curled. "Don't flatter yourself. Nothing you do will ever be part of my moment." And then, in a gesture so deliberate it drew gasps from those watching, Melissa tipped the glass. Water cascaded down, splashing across the floor directly in front of the boardroom doors. "Oh no," she said mockingly, turning to the small crowd that had gathered. "Look at this mess. If only someone here knew how to clean up properly." Her eyes bored into Marcus. Marcus knelt again, steady as always, taking out his mop and cloth. He didn't speak. He didn't argue. He just worked, his movements controlled, professional. But silence in that moment carried more weight than words. Melissa stepped aside, addressing the arriving clients with false humor. "Imagine, gentlemen, flying in to discuss a multi-million-dollar partnership, and the first thing you see is this circus." The clients' smiles froze. One of them frowned. Another exchanged a glance with the CEO, who had just entered the lobby at that precise moment. The CEO's eyes narrowed. He said nothing yet, but he had seen enough. And unknown to Melissa, the camera phone had captured every second. Her smirk, her words, her deliberate act of humiliation. By the time the meeting began upstairs, the clip had already bounced from one employee's phone to another, multiplying across group chats like wildfire. During the presentation, Melissa delivered her points with calculated charm, her voice smooth, her gestures polished. But the room was not fully hers. Clients were distracted. Whispers spread at the table. Phones buzzed quietly in pockets. The evidence was already out there. When she finished, the CEO thanked her curtly and shifted the focus to Daniel Brooks, who presented with clarity and respect. Melissa forced a smile, but her knuckles tightened around her pen. Something was wrong. She could feel it. Meanwhile, Marcus returned to his station, unaware of how quickly the tides were turning. His dignity and silence had spoken louder than Melissa's cruelty. And soon, the building itself would answer for her arrogance. The spark had been struck. The fire was spreading, and Melissa Harrington's perfect facade was seconds away from collapse. By the time Melissa returned to her office after the presentation, the storm had already begun. The video of her pouring water and mocking Marcus had spread like fire through every department. Desks buzzed with hushed conversations, phones lit up with notifications. Employees who once smiled politely now avoided her gaze, whispering in corners. Melissa sensed it. She slammed her bag onto her desk, muttering, "Ridiculous, they're all overreacting." She convinced herself her father's name, her family's wealth, and her polished record would shield her. Yet deep down, a tight knot of unease began to form. Meanwhile, Marcus had resumed his duties, oblivious to the speed at which his quiet dignity was rewriting the story. Colleagues approached him with small nods of respect, some even apologizing for staying silent during Melissa's cruelty. Marcus simply replied, "Respect is shown in actions, not words. Do better next time." His calmness carried more weight than any speech. By late afternoon, HR summoned Melissa to a meeting. The CEO was present, his tone controlled but heavy. He placed a phone on the table, pressed play, and the video filled the silence. Every detail was clear. Melissa's smirk, her words, the deliberate humiliation. "This is not just unprofessional," the CEO said coldly. "It's corrosive. Clients have already contacted me. They are reconsidering our partnership." Melissa tried to defend herself. "It was a joke. People are too sensitive these days. He's just—" "Just what?" the CEO interrupted, eyes narrowing. "A human being? An employee who deserves respect? You embarrassed not only him but this entire company." For the first time, Melissa's voice faltered. You can't take everything from me because of one misunderstanding." But the CEO was unmoved. "It's not one misunderstanding. It's a pattern. And patterns have consequences." Tears threatened, but Melissa forced herself to remain stoic. She stormed out, furious at the betrayal of colleagues who had once praised her, furious that a man she considered beneath her had become the center of sympathy. Across the building, Marcus sat alone in the break room for a few minutes, finally allowing the weight of the day to settle on his shoulders. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the surge of emotions he had kept locked inside. Memories of losing his company, of being told he was a failure, of watching doors close again and again, they all returned. And yet, for once, the tide was shifting in his favor. Still, there was no triumph in his heart, only exhaustion, only the echo of Melissa's words. "Men like you were born to stay out of the way." That sentence replayed like a wound. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, whispering to himself, "Not this time. Not anymore." That night, the building's group chats exploded. The clip had reached outsiders now, friends, family, even news blogs sniffing for a story. Melissa's name trended in the worst way possible. Her emails filled with criticism, some from strangers, others from clients demanding an explanation. The next morning, as she walked into the lobby, the air felt different. Colleagues parted, but not out of respect, out of discomfort. Eyes followed her, but no one greeted her. She realized the silence was louder than insults, and then she saw Marcus. He was by the elevator, checking the security log. Their eyes met briefly. Marcus didn't smirk, didn't gloat. He simply nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement, and returned to his work. That calm nod hit Melissa harder than any confrontation could, because in that moment she understood. Her empire of arrogance was cracking, and Marcus's dignity had become the foundation others looked up to. The consequences were no longer abstract. They were here, they were real, and they were only just beginning. Have you ever seen arrogance collapse this fast? Drop your thoughts below, and subscribe, because the past that built Marcus is about to be revealed. The building buzzed with scandal, but beneath the noise, Marcus carried his duties as if nothing had changed. Yet everyone around him felt it. His quiet strength had turned into a silent protest, and his name was on every whisper. But to understand why Marcus remained so calm while the world shifted, we must step back. Years earlier, to a life he had built and lost. Marcus Johnson was not always a man in uniform cleaning floors. Once, he was Sergeant Johnson, commanding a squad overseas. He had been the anchor his men leaned on, the steady voice in chaos, the shield in fire. Those years carved into him a discipline that never left. He believed leadership wasn't about rank, it was about responsibility. When he returned home, Marcus didn't chase luxury. He wanted purpose. With his savings and a battered pickup truck, he launched Carter Transport, a small logistics company in Atlanta. It started with 2 employees, then 10, then 20. But Marcus didn't just hire anyone. He gave chances to people no one else would touch. Ex-cons, single parents, high school dropouts. He believed everyone deserved a second chance. Business grew, contracts came, and soon Carter Transport was a respected name in the community. Marcus was no billionaire, but he was proud. His daughter Alana would sit at his desk after school, doing homework while he handled invoices. He dreamed of sending her to college without debt, of showing her that dignity could be built with hard hands and honest work. But then the financial crisis swept through like a hurricane. Contracts dissolved overnight. Fuel prices spiked. Banks called in loans. Within months, trucks were repossessed. Marcus poured everything he had into keeping the company afloat, but it wasn't enough. One by one, employees left. Some cried when they said goodbye. Others hugged him, whispering, "Thank you for giving me a chance." In the end, the business collapsed. The house was sold. His marriage, already strained, broke apart under the weight of failure. His wife left, unable to see past the rubble. Marcus was left with a small apartment and the responsibility of raising Alana, yet he never let despair consume him. Instead, he told his daughter, "Life will knock you down, but our worth isn't measured in what we lose. It's measured in how we stand up again." Now, years later, as Melissa's empire of arrogance crumbled, Marcus embodied those words. His flashback was not just memory. It was armor. He had already lost everything once. He knew humiliation. He knew despair. That was why Melissa's cruelty couldn't break him. He had already been broken and rebuilt. Meanwhile, in the present, a subplot began to take shape. Melissa, desperate to salvage her reputation, reached out to a close ally on the board. She begged for support, claiming she was being targeted unfairly. But even her allies hesitated. One whispered, "There's video, Melissa. It's not rumor. It's there, plain as day." Melissa slammed her phone shut, furious. She turned her anger toward Marcus, convinced he was somehow orchestrating her downfall. But Marcus, in the break room, was opening a text from Alana. "Saw the clip, Dad. Proud of you. Don't let them silence your worth." The message steadied him. His past had forged him. His daughter reminded him of his purpose. And now the company itself was being forced to confront what it had allowed to fester. The storm wasn't over. It was only gathering strength. The fallout could no longer be contained. By the end of the week, the board demanded an emergency meeting. Melissa Harrington walked into the conference room in her white blazer, head held high, though the circles under her eyes betrayed sleepless nights. She was determined to fight, convinced she could still twist the narrative in her favor. The CEO began without ceremony. "Before we discuss contracts, we must address conduct. Specifically, yours, Ms. Harrington." He tapped his tablet, and once again, the video played on the big screen. No one looked away. The smirk, The spill. The words. It was undeniable. Melissa shifted uncomfortably, but forced a smile. It was taken out of context. I was under stress. Surely we don't destroy careers over a 30-second clip. Daniel Brooks spoke calmly from across the table. Respect isn't optional, Melissa. It's the foundation of leadership. You didn't just humiliate Marcus. You humiliated all of us. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. For the first time, Melissa realized she was outnumbered. The CEO's verdict was final. Effective immediately, you will not be considered for the vice president role. Daniel Brooks will assume that position. The announcement hit Melissa like a slap. Her lips parted, but no words came. Applause broke out around the table. Not loud, but steady. Daniel stood, thanked the board, and promised to lead with integrity. Melissa sat frozen, face pale, rage simmering beneath her skin. "You can't do this," she hissed. "I built my reputation here." The CEO's gaze was sharp. "Reputations are built on character. Yours collapsed the moment you forgot that." As Melissa stormed out, the board shifted focus. Not to her, but to Marcus. The CEO stood, gesturing towards the door. "Bring him in." Marcus entered cautiously, still in his uniform. He looked out of place among tailored suits and polished shoes. Yet when he stood before them, shoulders square, there was no mistaking the quiet authority he carried. "Marcus," the CEO began, "this company needs leaders who embody dignity, not destroy it. We'd like to promote you to head of security and facilities." The room erupted in nods of agreement. Marcus blinked, stunned. "Sir, I just do my job. I don't know if—" "You do more than your job," the CEO cut in. "You set an example. That's leadership." Slowly, Marcus nodded. His voice was steady but low. "Then I'll accept, with gratitude, and I'll do everything I can to make this building a place where people feel safe and respected." Applause this time was louder. Employees later said it was the first genuine applause they had heard in months. That night, Marcus walked home under the city lights, phone buzzing with messages of congratulations. But what meant the most was a call from his daughter. "Dad," Alana said, voice bright. "I knew they'd see it. I knew they'd see you." Marcus smiled. A rare, quiet smile. "It's not about me, Alana. It's about making sure no one else gets treated the way I was. That's the work ahead." Resolve had replaced silence. The soldier in him. The father in him. The man who had once lost everything. He was no longer simply enduring. He was preparing. Because the fight wasn't over. Melissa's downfall was public, but her bitterness was festering. And Marcus knew. People like her rarely leave quietly. Would you trust a leader like Marcus in your workplace? Comment below because the first real confrontation between him and Melissa is about to erupt. Marcus's promotion should have closed the chapter. For many, it felt like justice had already been served. Yet, beneath the polished surface of the company, Melissa's bitterness was brewing into something darker. She returned the following week, not as the proud candidate for vice president, but as an executive stripped of authority and surrounded by suspicion. Whispers followed her down every hallway. Colleagues avoided her desk. Conversations ceased the moment she stepped into a room. It was humiliation. Public and relentless. And Melissa could not stand it. Late one afternoon, as Marcus walked through the lobby reviewing new security protocols, Melissa confronted him. Her eyes burned with fury. "Enjoying your little promotion, are you?" she spat, her voice echoing off the marble walls. Marcus kept his gaze steady. "I'm just doing my work, ma'am." "Don't you ma'am me," she snapped. "You think you've won because they handed you a title? You're nothing but a janitor in a different uniform." The lobby fell silent. Employees at their desks froze, ears straining. Phones began to rise again, subtle and discreet. They knew what was about to happen. Marcus didn't flinch. Titles don't matter. Respect does. And you lost that long before this. Melissa stepped closer, her heels clicking like gunshots. Do you know who I am? My family, my name, built this city's skyline. And you? You're a stain on the floor I walk over. Marcus's jaw tightened. For the first time, his calm cracked just enough to reveal the fire beneath. You've mistaken silence for weakness, but this company sees you for what you are now. And so do I. Gasps rippled through the lobby. Melissa's face flushed crimson. She raised her voice, shrill with desperation. You think they'll keep you when this blows over? People like you are replaceable. People like me are legacy. The CEO's voice cut through before Marcus could respond. He had entered unnoticed, standing near the stairwell. His words were sharp as steel. Legacy means nothing when it's built on arrogance. All heads turned. Melissa froze, her lips trembling. The CEO stepped forward, his presence heavy. This ends now, Miss Harrington. You will step down from your role effective immediately. Security, Marcus, see that she leaves the premises. The irony struck the room like lightning. The man she had mocked, the man she tried to break, now held the authority to escort her out. Melissa's knees wavered. She looked around, desperate for someone, anyone, to defend her. But the lobby was silent, save for the hum of cameras recording. Marcus stepped forward, not with triumph, but with quiet duty. Ms. Harrington, he said firmly, it's time to go. Her eyes filled with tears of rage. You'll regret this, she hissed. But even her threat sounded hollow. As Marcus walked her to the doors, employees leaned forward, watching history unfold. For the first time, the power balance had reversed completely. Melissa's reign of intimidation was over, and Marcus's dignity stood taller than the marble columns around them. But as the doors closed behind her, Marcus knew this was not the final battle. The storm still had one more strike left. Melissa Harrington was gone from the building, escorted out by the very man she had tried to humiliate. For most, the story seemed finished. Justice had been served. The villain had fallen. But reality is rarely so clean. 2 weeks later, Marcus walked through the same marble lobby, now carrying a new badge, head of security and facilities. Employees greeted him warmly, some shaking his hand, others thanking him for what his resilience had inspired. The air of fear that once hung over the office seemed lighter, as though people finally believed they could breathe freely again. Yet behind closed doors, Melissa had not disappeared. Stripped of her role, her pride was wounded, but her bitterness had sharpened into obsession. Late at night, she drafted angry emails, blaming Marcus for her downfall, insisting to anyone who would listen that she had been set up. When no one responded, she turned to darker thoughts. One Friday evening, as Marcus was leaving after a late security check, he spotted a shadow near the entrance. Melissa stepped into the light, eyes hollow, hair unkempt, nothing like the polished executive she once was. "You think you've won," she whispered, voice trembling with rage. "But you stole everything from me, my career, my reputation, my life." Marcus's tone was calm, steady. "I didn't steal anything. You lost it the moment you forgot how to treat people." Her lips twisted. "No, this isn't over. People like me don't vanish. You'll see." Security guards moved forward, but Marcus raised a hand. He looked directly at her, his voice firm but not cruel. "Melissa, this is your chance to walk away, to start over. Don't waste it chasing ghosts." For a brief second, her expression wavered. Then, with a bitter laugh, she turned and vanished into the night. The next week, Marcus stood at a podium at the company's first employee town hall under his leadership. he announced the creation of a scholarship fund for underserved students, dedicated to giving young people opportunities his company had once given years ago. The applause was thunderous, not just for the fund, but for what it represented: a new culture of respect. As Marcus stepped down, his phone buzzed. A message from Alana lit up the screen. "Proud of you, Dad. Keep building." He smiled, placing the phone back in his pocket. But even as hope filled the building, a lingering question remained. In a quiet cafe across town, Melissa sat hunched over her laptop, scrolling through an email thread with a subject line that read, "Confidential, lawsuit strategy." Her eyes glimmered with the fire of someone who wasn't finished. The storm wasn't over. It was only moving to a new battlefield.